I am Hannah. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm the creator behind the guide, and this is my first time going live, so I appreciate everyone tuning in to learn a little bit more. So yesterday was a really big day at Mixpanel. We launched an exciting piece of content, Advance Your Product Analytics Strategy, which is a first of its kind guide to understanding product analytics maturity with a companion assessment. So this was done in partnership with the amazing OpenView as well as Product Collective. So to share a little bit more about the guide, I am joined by Arthur Cilley, a senior sales engineer here at Mixpanel. And Arthur, you have been at Mixpanel for over 5 years now, which is really cool. And you've helped thousands of companies begin and optimize their journey with product analytics. So I feel like you're pretty much an expert in this area. So could you tell us what is product analytics and what is product analytics maturity?
Yeah, so with product analytics at its core, it's made up of 4 pillars. It's one way to think about it: data collection, depth of analysis, collaboration, and product metrics. And so your maturity in product analytics is a function of your capability across these 4 areas. And ultimately, if there's like one takeaway, it's how you're using product data to make product decisions.
Yeah, so bringing that product data up to the forefront. Yeah, that makes sense.
Hannah, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the content of the guide?
Yeah, sure. So we created the guide and the assessment because we've actually heard from countless times and people that they really weren't sure if they're getting the most out of their strategy as well as their overall approach to product analytics. And they're unsure of how they compared to their peers. So with the launch, we wanted people to be able to assess their maturity and really understand what should they be doing next. So with the guide, they're really able to easily see, what are the milestones and the traits that define each stage, and understand how data is used to make those product decisions, like you mentioned. We'll also share the sophistication of the questions asked in each stage, as well as things that you probably should consider if you want to progress. So actually, Arthur, when you read it, what are some things that stood out to you?
So a few things. One, product maturity comes in stages, and naturally as stages, they're sequential, but they're not necessarily consecutive, right? Teams can jump from novice to a couple stages up like advanced in maturity, so long as they've collected the right data, are focusing on asking the right questions, and have the right tooling. And so, there are certain solutions like Google Analytics that are great for marketing analytics, but are inherently limited to the kind of product data you can track. So if you start asking the right questions about the product, you'll realize you're not collecting the right data, or you don't have the right tool for the job. And when you start making those necessary changes, all of a sudden you're maturing across multiple pillars within the product analytics maturity, and you can jump and evolve pretty quickly.
So just want to clarify, you're saying that the tool doesn't necessarily define your stage, or how does a tool, I guess, fit into the different stages?
That's a great question. So maturity is not defined by your tool. It's a function of it, but it's not purely defined by your tool, but rather how you incorporate data into product decision-making process. Now, tools matter because there may be inherent limits on what they could do, like we just mentioned with Google Analytics, but they don't solely define your stage. And I've worked with folks using more advanced tooling or more appropriate tooling in very basic ways. So if we had to use, I saw a workout analogy in the guide, and that was great. And if we were to think about working out with dumbbells as an analogy, you can really limit yourself by how you're using them, only using them for curls or chest press, for example. But the reality is there's a lot of flexibility and creativity in how you can use them. But there is going to be a limit, right? If you really want to build size and strength, you'll plateau. And so that's when you would bring in other tools like barbells, for example. That would be more appropriate.
You must work out.
I clearly have learned way too much about working out. So for those of you who are interested, feel free to DM me.
Product analytics and workout, very, very similar.
That's my niche.
That's your niche. All right, Arthur, in the guide, we use those 4 pillars that you just mentioned: data collection, depth of insights, collaboration, as well as product metrics. Do you feel like one of these pillars is maybe more important than another?
That's a tough one. Okay, well, if I had kids, it's like you're asking me to pick the favorite here. So if I had to pick, I would say data collection, but specifically asking the right questions that inform the data you collect. Ultimately, because what you're able to do with data collection will then impact the ceiling, the potential of the other 3 pillars.
So it's the domino effect of you got to get that right in order for everything else to kind of fall into place.
Correct.
That makes sense. And then between all the different stages, non-existent, novice, intermediate, advanced, as well as experts, where do you think that most companies fall into that you've worked with? And do you feel like a lot of companies either feel like their strategy is maybe better or worse than it actually is?
Well, there's definitely a level of self-selection for folks who are talking to us. They're interested. They've made some progress maybe. And so I would say novice to intermediate for the most part. And of course, there's the general trend in the world for digitalization, data being the new gold, as they say, but it's accelerated by COVID. And so more and more companies are trying to just get their hands on data with a hope that just translates to value immediately. And the reality is much messier. It requires much more forethought and intent. And what we often see is people doing the easiest option, the path of least resistance, which is free solutions that collect everything under the sun, maybe, or even if they're not, they just want everything, right? And that isn't necessarily results in the right tool or the right approach for where they are in the maturity.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Now, I loved working with you on this book, Hannah, and for those who are interested, for those who are interested and want a Cliff Notes preview of the stages, Hannah, in one sentence or less, I'm going to have you say, for the purpose of those listening in, what comes to mind for each stage.
Okay. In the hot seat. Let's go.
All right. Stage 1 or stage 0, non-existent.
You're not really collecting data. Your decisions are guided by something other than data, maybe intuition, maybe customer feedback, but data is not really top of mind for you.
Yeah. So it's a lot of opinions being thrown around. Oftentimes, the strongest voice in the room.
Yes, exactly.
Which can work and sometimes poses great risk. What about the second stage, novice?
Yeah. So novice. Just basic overall, basic reporting, basic collecting. You're probably measuring those high level metrics like page views or maybe traffic.
Right. Yep. So a lot of general trends at a high level, maybe a little bit difficult to really get down into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, that double click is a little bit more challenging.
Right. But what about the next one, intermediate?
Yeah, so this is when you really start to put data on a pedestal. So you're able to inform product decisions with data, but it's not required. It's not going to be something that is always looked at, but is something that it helps when you're making those product decisions.
Yeah, so sometimes that means there's some teams or smaller teams within a greater organization that are either using product decisions or data to figure out what's wrong with the product, or are informing maybe even larger team-specific roadmaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then advanced.
This is really when data comes to the forefront. So this is when you start thinking of data is going to be the compass for most of all your product decisions. This is what you're looking at and you're working towards across the team. So all decisions, data will be involved.
Yeah, it's almost like a necessary checkpoint that you have to go through every step of the way. It's quite non-negotiable.
Yep.
All right, what about expert?
The holy grail. So yeah, with the expert stage, this is really when the entire product development team, they have access to the data, they're doing the analysis themselves. In every facet of all your product decisions that are being made, data is required. It is dependent on. So everyone really cares about data and is thinking about it in their everyday. So
yeah, and with the risk of sounding cheesy, it's like very ingrained to the culture of the entire product org. That makes sense.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, with that, we'll hope everyone gives the guide a read and takes the quiz. We really want to see how you guys stack up. We've just dropped the link in the chat. The guide, we should note, it's an open format, so you can really jump in and really read around whatever area you want to check out. It's open to you. Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you want to dive deeper, we'll be having an interactive webinar on December 9th. So sign up in the second link that was just shared in the chat. I want to thank OpenView as well as Product Collective again for partnering with us on this piece. Arthur, thanks for taking the time and sharing all these insights today. And thank you everyone who has tuned in. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Yeah, take care.